Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at GME's path and where it will land in, the next few months or so. So taking a look at the larger time frame here. Let's just get rid of this. So there is a gap to be filled. So let's just talk about the gaps first. There's a gap to be filled. Let's get rid of this. There's a gap to be filled at 1750 roughly. So if you open up the chart on the hourly, you can see there is a small gap that does need to be filled. Then your next gap to be filled is on the upside, or to the upside. So that lies around 23.30 something, 23.33. So historically, GME has closed its gaps. So if you look over here, there was a gap here and it did close. There was a gap here that closed as well. There's a gap here and that closed as well. There's a gap left here and that eventually did close as well. And where else? One here. There's a large one right here on earnings. So it gapped up. But it did eventually fill as well. So looking at this, right, there are two gaps, one to the downside and one to the upside. Pulling up our Fibonacci, we can see, so you'll take your low to your high, so 64.83. Okay, somewhere there, that's close enough. So you can see that GME has caught the golden pocket as support. So caught it once here. We had a nice bounce. Caught it here again. Nice bounce. Again right here. And that brings us to the fourth time that GME will be testing this zone. Hopefully it does bounce, but if it doesn't bounce, I'd be looking at 1750 to fill that gap on the downside. You fall any lower and you're looking at your other Fibonacci at 786 at 1485 or $15. So if GME does continue to go up to the upside, you simply just take your Fibonacci to your high, to the low, and as you'll see, all these numbers are your upside targets. So the first number that you need to clear is the 236, so that's at $24. Once you clear that, you're for sure heading over to 29. But you do have to, so what it didn't do over here was hold it as support. Instead, it turned into resistance. So what we want to see is breaking above that 236, holding it as support, and then going up and testing the 382, where you'll definitely see some heavy resistance. So if you just look over onto the 1 day and you just draw a straight line across, you'll see that this point has acted as support and or resistance several times. So, but the main focus is just looking at these topside targets. So you're looking at 30 and then most definitely trying to break this resistance. That's really, really hard to break through. Historically, again, if you just draw another straight line across, you'll see. And then looking to break prior high at 64. There is one more gap that GME does need to fill to the top side, and that comes to around, what is it, 73? So there is a gap right here. So let's just draw that out. There is a gap to be filled right here. And then obviously breaking all-time highs. So if you take your fib from your high to your low, it'll generate these numbers. The max extension is at $144.60. If you go back to the start over here, and if you just disregard this big move up, and you take your fib from your high to your low, so you'll see that the max extension for it is around $333. But again, you do have a strong resistance that you do need to break at the golden pocket. So if you take your high here and your low here, you do see around 39.41 area will act as a strong resistance zone. So that's that. Let's take a look at some of the other tools. So for example, let's take a look at the 50 and 200 moving average. So you are still supported by the 200 moving average and struggling to break above that 50. So if it does fall below to fill the gap to the downside, you're just hoping that the golden pocket will, or not the golden pocket, the 200 moving average will help support you. All right, turning on Metric Pro. So these are indicators that basically help track like where the stock's going, liquidity and stuff. So if you go down to the 90 minutes, basically above and below it. So if you're above it, it's bullish. If you're below it, it's bearish. Right now, since you're below it, it's bearish. Once you make a move above it, you'll be testing the purple line. So that's like your kind of trend, quote unquote, trend line for support or resistance. So in this case, it would be resistance because you're testing it to the upside. So what I want to see is this yellow line come down a little bit and price breaking above that yellow line, all while the purple one, Metric Pro Plus, is coming down and acting as a resistance. So what you want to see is sort of like something that sort of looks like this, and then price testing this. Hopefully if it does break above, then you're going to fill this gap, but if you reject, then you'll just fall lower. But that's kind of what we're looking at least on the hourly. When you look at it on the daily, you are below it, so that is bearish. For the time that you did get back up above it was over here. So let me just turn off the one in the yellow so we don't get confused. When you did get back up above it, we did see a strong move up. So that gave us a nice 400 something percent, which was pretty cool. And then when it did break down, you saw a move down to the downside around 22%. You had some tests in this range here, but it just couldn't hold above it. If you did play these were, that candle was 10%. That was 11%. So that was around 20 something percent, like if you were to play it, right? There were times where it did try to break above, but again, that's where you would set your stop loss accordingly. So what that means is, say if you were to take a play here, you risk, let's say about maybe 5 to 10%. But for the purpose of this video, let's just do 5. So, and you're targeting like maybe 20. You just run it along the line, and whenever it breaks below, then that's where you'll take profit. So right here is where I would take profit. That would net me almost a 100% move. Now with the yellow line, it does track a shorter time frame. So you can, let's say like if you're tracking this on a 90 minutes, you can get out a little bit earlier. So if you were to take a position here, you could stop out over here, and that would be a nice gain for you. So right now we're looking at GameStop to at least make a move back up above Metric Pro, and I think that's when we'll start to see some upside. Now it could be some upside like this, or it could even be a big one. But right now what we're just looking for is just for it to get up above so we can get some bullish price action. But right now it looks pretty bearish. All right. So let's turn this off. Let's look at the Bollinger Bands. So the Bollinger Bands were tightening up over here, and then it started to move away from each other. Price tried to break out of the upper band, but was ultimately kept inside. So that's something that you do have to keep in mind when playing around with the Bollinger Bands. Is that most of the time when you get a breakout like this, sharp reaction up, the Bollinger Bands wants you to be kept, or wants price to be kept within the boundaries. So for example, if you take a look here, the Bollinger Bands were topping out here, bottoming here. When price broke below the Bollinger Bands, there was a sharp reaction which sent it back within the zone. So if you're above the basis line here, the one in the blue, that's pretty bullish. You'll trend higher. And if you're below, then you'll trend lower. So right now, when it did touch this lower band, there was a nice bounce up. But right now, there's still just price action just kind of just settling down over here. So if it does go lower, you'll want to see it maybe touch the lower band and bounce back off. But right now we're not quite there yet. If it does get above this blue line, say for example the blue line does trend lower like this, and price kind of goes up and above it, you should expect price to at least head back to the upper band and test it. And that's where you'll find your support and resistance. So that's the Bollinger Band on the 4 hour. On the weekly, you do see it tightening up. So it's at 1770. So it is around just where that gap fill needs to be. So if GME does fall lower, the lower band of the Bollinger Band will support it. So meaning if price kind of falls around like this, and this green line kind of goes like that, right? You'll fill the gap while being supported by the lower part of the band. So this is pretty nice to see that it's consolidating and tightening up, because it just means that the next move will be pretty explosive. So for example, you got a move over here where it tightened up, right? And then it started to explode away. Then over here, tightened up, then it started to explode away. So what you want to see over here is the Bollinger Bands kind of go like this, tighten up, then explode away. So that's what we're seeing. And just to look at what happened previously in 2020, where it tightened up over here and you start to see it move apart. So that's pretty bullish. But right now what I'm looking at is metric pro, and for price to remain at least, so this is the weekly, for price to remain at least above metric pro here and continue to make its way up. So that's where we're at. So again, to reiterate, the yellow line does have to come down, and when you get a candle close above it, it indicates that it is a bullish movement and that there is further price action to the upside. So this is where I want to see GME start to move, is when you get the yellow line come down and the purple line trend down as well. Then for price to break above the yellow line, test metric pro plus as resistance, and once you do break above it, fill the gap here and possibly make your way a little bit higher. So those are the two paths for GME, and we are seeing metric pro already trend lower, the one in the yellow line. So we're already seeing a trend lower, which is bullish. That's good news. That means eventually we'll catch something that looks like this. So we did fall below here, it fell, and as it's falling, price is trying to break above it, and when it did, it tested metric pro here, metric pro plus. So that's what you want to see, and then hopefully a breakout just like this. So yeah, all right guys, that's pretty much the end of this video. Tomorrow is a pretty big day. So they're looking to cut between 25 and 50 basis points. So we'll see how that affects the whole market and how that affects GME. But yeah, if you are to fall down lower, look at that 1750, or if you do break above, you're looking to close and reach DFV's cost basis at 23.41. All right, guys. Maybe I'll post another video towards the end of the week, but that's it for now.